Yo. Hey, I've been reviewing video games and need your help. What's up? This may sound a bit strange, but I kinda need to go inside a computer. You know my abilities don't work like that. What if what I'm reviewing is something like Tron or Reboot or something? I would still need to be there, but I can try something. I'll take what I can get. How's that? I think you are off by a few bits. Oh well, I guess I can start with the Game Boy Advance game.
So, Tron 2.0 was released in 2003 as a pseudo-sequel to the 1982 film Tron. About a year later, the game was ported to the original Xbox, with a special version coming out on the Game Boy Advance. Now, the PC and Xbox versions are both first-person shooter games, while the Game Boy Advance version is a isometric platformer shooter. The plot of the GBA version is also different. You play as either Tron or Mercury, who is a new character to this game, as they try and stop the Conqueror, a program that's trying to create the ultimate computer virus so they can take over the Incom systems. There's not really much that I'll say about this one, but it is a fun GBA game with sections where you control a light tank, light cycle sections, and even minigames. In fact, some of these minigames can be played with other people with GBAs. Before I move on from this version, it does also include ports of Disc of Tron and the original Tron arcade games as bonuses. I thought I'd at least mention this in this review while I had the chance.
Anyway, with that out of the way, Leo, can you try and get me out of this? Hang on. How about now? Well, at least the resolution has improved. I'll just talk about the PC version while you figure this out. So, in 2002, Disney released a 20th anniversary copy of Tron on DVD, and with it was a trailer for a new PC game. There wasn't much shown in this trailer, but it teased a new project, at the time known as Tron Killer App, which would later be reused for the Xbox and Game Boy Advance versions of this game. This would later become Tron 2.0, which came out a year later in 2003. This game was made by Monolith Productions, who had created No One Lives Forever and would go on to make the Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War game. The game starts with a random program being captured by a virus known as Thorn. They corrupt this email program to gain the permissions that they have to take over the system. Meanwhile, in the real world, we meet Jethro Jet Bradley. This is the son of Alan Bradley from the original movie, and he's working at Incom as a game developer. Though, as of right now, all we really see him do is play the Tron arcade game, and promptly losing because, to be fair, the game itself is a bit challenging. It is kind of funny to me, but Jet here in the real world looks like the Postal dude from Postal 2, and I can't unsee it now that I've noticed it. Alan calls Jet and asks why he doesn't just take a larger programming job at the company, with Jet saying he's content just working on games. Suddenly, someone breaks into the laser development room where Alan is. Jet quickly rushes over to figure out what happened with an AI called Mathria that Alan created, telling Jet that she needs his help before blasting him with the digitizing laser. This leads to one of my favorite openings to a game from this time. You see all the people who worked on it or lent their voices as if this was a proper film sequel to Tron. It honestly feels epic. And I know there are games that do stuff like this, but for a game like this that was meant to be a sequel to the hit film, in massive air quotes, it it just feels epic. Once the title sequence ends, we finally have control of Jet and are given a quick tutorial section. Now, thankfully, I am playing the game with the Killer App mod, which allows me to not only skip this section, but gives me access to the best upgrades in the game, known as subroutines. Frankly, I recommend this mod because the game itself can get really hard really fast, and there are other things that it does improve. It is optional, and I'll get more into the mod itself later, but for now, we need to get Jet an identity disk and get out of here, as the corruption is affecting this server. Eventually, Jet gets captured by the Colonel, who is the security program in charge of the Incon system. In a way, he's kind of like Sark from the original movie, but less of a proper villain and more of a antagonistic force. He's mostly just kind of doing his job. The Colonel here believes that Jet is the source of the corruption and plans on just straight up derezzing him. However, before he can, another program named Mercury suggests sending Jet to the Light Cycle games. This leads us to what most people remember Tron for, the Light Cycles. Now, this section can definitely be annoying. Hell, I've played this game before many times, and I still suck at it. Frankly, I suggest running away from any enemies and letting them take each other out, and then just head to the exit once it's open. It won't always work, but it is better than nothing, and it is a decent strategy to get you past the light cycle sections that are in this game. After doing a few races, Mercury ends up breaking out of the games and tells us to take the same path that she had just opened. Once escaping, she tells Jet that she was also sent to help Mithria, the AI that Alan had made. We quickly go to grab her before the entire server is set to be reformatted, as the corruption has gotten to such a bad state that it's the only option to get rid of said corruption. I guess somebody was using LimeWire to get a couple songs on a company computer or something. We quickly make it to a port and leave the server before we get derezed, but Mercury stays behind to defeat some of the corrupted programs, referred to as Zealots. Maybe if Byte didn't take his sweet-ass time unlocking the force field, we wouldn't have this problem. But this brings us to sort of an archive. We get contacted by a user going by the name of Guest that we need to find the Tron Legacy code, which clues about are hidden in 3 emails in this archive. I haven't talked about them until now, but you can find these data clusters that have weapons, armor, and a few upgrades like a higher jump, a scanning program that'll tell you the health of an enemy, or even an upgrade that will make it harder for enemies to hear you coming. In these data clusters, you can also find emails from Incom and FCOM employees, and they fill in the gaps of the lore between the events of Tron and Tron 2.0. You also get to learn of the hostile takeover FCOM is trying to do, and learn of Jet's past. While it is completely optional, it does, like I said, fill in gaps of the story, and I enjoy it. To be fair, this game isn't the first nor the last game that does this, but it is kinda cool, especially learning some details that you wouldn't otherwise know. This eventually brings us to an older Incom computer, where we meet an old program known as I Know. That is just a lame pun, but I do like this character. He leads us to where the legacy code that we are looking for is. And he also talks about this system as if it's a high-end PC, but all of the specs are for a computer in the early 90s at best. I can't bring it to break this old program's heart. We have to overclock the system so Mithria can enter, which leads this system to start fluctuating before we finally get to the legacy code. I know gives us a small farewell before we head to compile the code, and it actually does kind of sad me. Despite us only knowing this character for a handful of levels, I grew kind of attached to him. We enter the net, which, funnily enough, if you take a look at the emails in this area, they will tell you that the Tron legacy code is meant as an upgrade to Tron's original code. That would let him remove unwanted users that were digitized into the system. Unfortunately, the code was never completed, as it never gave the program a way to differentiate from verified users. Guest tries to warn us about this as we're compiling it, but it's too late, as the code is compiled into Mithria, which turns her into a user-killing program. Jet quickly races out of the net to escape before one of FCOM's seeker programs captures her. So now we have two problems. This leads us to try and get into Thorn's systems with the help of Mercury, who had been brought back from Alan, who is revealed to be Guest during the whole debacle. Out in the real world, however, FCOM, now with the correction algorithms needed to digitize people, as a test use Alan Bradley, who they send into Thorn's system, most likely as a way to kill him. That or they don't know what they're doing, which honestly, considering what we learn, would make a bit of sense as well. Either way, this brings us to Thorn's corrupted server. The ICPs are about to mount an assault on the place in hopes of getting rid of Thorn and the corruption as a whole, with us arriving just as they're moving out. It is a bit of a problem because we need Thorn's help to figure out where FCOM would keep Mithria. This leads us to fight the corrupted programs in the system as we journey deeper and deeper before finally getting to Thorn, who is almost dead thanks to the Colonel. Now, if you take the time to read the emails you can find here, you learn that Thorn was the head of security for FCOM. He was tasked with getting the correction algorithms from Alan so that FCOM could enact their plan. That plan was to send people into systems and steal information. You know, how hackers will usually steal your info and sell it to the highest bidder. Basically that. Unfortunately, Thorn, thinking they wouldn't need the algorithms, was sent into the systems and learned firsthand why they were needed as the digitization process corrupted him into this virus. In a way, I feel sorry for him. I mean, FCOM in general is doing scummy things, but he was used to test this experiment. Granted, he did corrupt multiple systems and programs in the NCOM servers, so he is still a villain at the end of the day. I digress. We end up fighting the Colonel, which is a pretty cool fight, and even leads him to force us to use the disc, which isn't even a weapon I had really messed with until now. And we do eventually defeat him. Jet tells Thorn that if they could get the correction algorithms, they could try and reverse the corruption. But it's too late. Thorn is already too weak from the battle with the Colonel that happened before we got here. But before he dies, he gives us access to his PDA that would have the password to get into the FCOM servers. Also, I think this is technically the first time we see a user die inside the grid. I know that Flynn does die at the end of Legacy, but depending on how the next Tron movie goes, he might not actually be dead. Plus, later in this very game, we see users being sent out of the system when they are derezed by Jet. So it makes me curious how a user can die in a system and how they just get ejected. After going through Thorn's PDA, which honestly is just an easy level, all you have to do is press a set number of buttons in a certain amount of time, we eventually end up in a firewall that FCOM servers had, which we have to reconfigure so that we can get into the proper server. Making things harder is the fact that FCOM is now starting to send in their data rapes, as they call them, to enter the system as they ready their portable server to take over the digital world. It's not that these data rapes are particularly hard to deal with, but it is something that does make this bit a little more annoying. I guess it's how you know you're getting close to the end. Jet works to sabotage the mobile server, which looks like Sark's ship from the first movie and Clue's ship from Legacy. Please tell me I'm not the only one who knows that. We work to destroy the stabilizing bits on the ship before entering it and lowering its power. As it takes off, we set the ship to crash, which Jet quickly heads to the end of the ship where Alan is working to fix Mithria after racing through a few light cycle courses with a rebuilt Mercury. I skimmed over her, but Mercury was built by Alan to find Mithria. She helps Jet and works as sort of a love interest, but frankly, I'd be more invested if I felt like she did more. She gets derezed as we leave one of the servers fairly early on, and is later seen when Jet and Mithria are in the net, but she doesn't recognize them, having been brought back from an earlier version. This scene is meant to be tragic, but I'm not really upset when I'm not attached to her. She doesn't really have enough screen time for me to be invested. Plus, when we see her at the end, it's supposed to be a bittersweet goodbye, but again, I'm not attached to her. Hell, I was more attached to Ino when he died because I actually got to interact with him and see him before he died. Anyway, Jet and Alan say their goodbyes to Mercury as they finally return to the real world, and despite my complaining, this scene is nice, though Jet did glitch out in the scene and had his model clip through the floor.
Leaving, aren't you? This is no world for a user. We're too crude and rudimentary.
If anybody is crude, it's us. We're not ready to exist here. Not yet, anyway.
Promise you'll search for me?
Of course.
We'd better get going.
Unfortunately, we aren't done just yet. As Jet enters the data stream to leave the systems, a mysterious creature follows him. So, at some point, while you were screwing up the FCOM server, the three villains that we see in the real world that are trying to enact this plan go inside the system to try and stop Jet and Alan. However, Alan had removed the correction algorithms from Mithria before they entered, which caused them to corrupt like Thorn and fuse into this viral monstrosity. I didn't mention their names, but honestly, I kinda don't care. They're more just there for fluff. Well, there's only one thing left to do. We need to fight this thing while we're in the data stream. It would probably be a bit more climatic if I didn't say fuck it and activate God mode while just blasting this thing until it goes down. That's not to say it isn't a cool fight, I mostly just want to get the game done. That being said, every time you get through one phase of this fight, one of the three FCOM employees separates from this monster until all of them are properly defeated. And you finally leave the grid. Not that that means anything, these three FCOM employees are still stuck in the system. In the final scene of the game, we see Alan transfer the Mithria files over to his own system before the FCOM server completely collapses. Jet asks if Mercury has made it off the system, with Alan telling her that she's no longer on the server, marking her save. The files finally transfer over before the system blue screens. Alan and Jet celebrate, but the CEO from FCOM tells them that he will get his revenge someday, though we never see that plot point ever followed up on. Funnily enough, it is theorized that this person is the same villain from the original film, whose name currently eludes me. Jet and Alan walk off as Jet tells his father he has a newfound respect for computers, before asking if he can get a copy of Mercury to use as a screensaver. As for the 3 FCOM employees that were still in the system, well, Alan did make sure they were safe on a drive that he had transferred the files to, but seeing as this game didn't really get a follow-up, they might as well be dead as well. You do know there was a comic sequel to 2.0, right? Yeah. I'll be brief on this. As of this video, I have not read the comic, and I have heard mixed things, but I would like to find out for myself. To my knowledge, however, it doesn't fully resolve the FCOM plot points. It also doesn't help that neither the comics nor this game is considered canon anymore in the larger Tron universe. And that's a shame, because this game is kick-ass. To be fair, it is difficult in places, which wasn't helped by my trackball mouse that I typically use starting to die on me. Poor thing is on its last legs. But outside of that, the game is still a challenge. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I did play this game with the Killer App mod, which does give you a gold sheet that gives you all the subroutines that you find throughout the game at their highest level all at once. It also raises all of Jet's stats to the max and makes the game much easier. I actually recommend doing this if it's your first playthrough. In fact, I recommend this mod in general, even if you don't use any of the God mode cheats, as it adds widescreen support, fixes up the game, and even adds skins to the multiplayer mode that are from the Xbox version of the game. Of course, I couldn't show this multiplayer mode off because I couldn't get it working, and as you might know by now, I don't really have a lot of people that I can play multiplayer games with. That being said, the person who made this mod is even working on adding modern controller support and upscaled textures. I highly recommend this game, and it even readily is available on places like Steam and GOG, which sadly you can't say about Tron Evolution. Anyway, I'm ready to get out of this place. Leo, you think you can get me out of here? I can surely try, but I make no promises. Did it work? This isn't the Starblade. The hell did you send me? Oh, son of a...